and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I'm Taylor Rockwell. On today's show, still no Daryl, so I called up American Soccer Now's Brian Sciaretta. We talked the USA's performance at the U20 World Cup, as well as which players' stocks will be on the rise because of that tournament. We also discussed some new-ish faces to the U.S. roster, looking in your direction Jesse Gonzalez and Kenny Saif, the current statuses of a few different young Americans in Europe, and the potential maybe possible future of Christian Pulisic. We also do have a sponsor on today's show, and you might just hear that Brummy Daryl Grove accent when it comes time to do some promoting. But before we get to that, here's my interview with ASN's Brian Sciaretta. Joining me now, I've got American Soccer Now's Brian Sciaretta. Brian, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Anytime, man. I'm looking forward to being controversial like I was last time.
Yeah, apparently. Theoretically controversial, I guess.
Yeah, the angry tweets was great.
That's what we strive for. We strive to get the angry tweets directed in your direction and away from us.
Yeah, well, I'm willing to soak it all up like a sponge, man. That's what I'm here for.
Well, I think Alexi Lalas, who was on the show yesterday, is really the ultimate sponge when it comes to negative tweeting. But then you can take second if you want. That's fine.
Yeah, well, Alexi's the godfather, we can all, what's cool about Alexi is like, a lot of people, he says things tongue-in-cheek, I think, just to stir the pot, and some people don't take them, he makes a lot of points that are very serious, and sometimes he makes points that aren't serious, but he sounds like he's serious just to kind of stroke the flames there, and sometimes people just get so emotional they can't tell the difference, but, I think Alexi has always been quite the character, and back to his playing days, and I think he's very good for the game here, and entertaining too.
Yeah, we agree, since I think we've had him on like 10 times now. But I wanted to talk to you. I avoided the U20 World Cup with him because I wanted to save that for you, because you've written a great article for ASN, American Soccer Now, called U20 World Cup, a mixed bag for Yanks. And it's a great kind of like point-by-point breakdown of all the different players, or the key players, and I wanted to kind of go through that. Maybe get like the Cliff Notes version for people who don't like to read. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I as a writer, man, I got to find the people who don't. I got to be able to find a way to reach the audience of people who don't like to read. It broadens my my followers.
Well, there we go. Well, so we'll start with the broad approach then. Looking at
the illiterate too. Yeah.
I'm not going to say which one of those I am, but one of them. So. Looking at this U20 team as a whole, then, there are going to be some people who think quarterfinal exit at the U20 World Cup with this team, with how good it is, that's kind of disappointing. But that seems to be the minority opinion here. I was pretty pleased with this team and what they did. What were your overall impressions, and are you pleased with the result and how this tournament went for the U20s?
Yeah, I think you got to be pleased. I think the game against Venezuela was an uphill climb. I think having 2 days rest versus 4 days rest for the opponent, that was already better at every position, most positions. Really kind of made it hard to pull an upset. If the U.S. had won, it would have been an upset. So I'm not taking anything away from Venezuela. But look, if you want to say something here, it's like everyone knows that the U.S. was shorthanded, that they didn't have a lot of their best players. Never before has the U.S. tried to go to a U20 World Cup without so many of its best players. And they still went to the quarterfinals, which is good. And then, look, and if you want to compare us to the team that beat the U.S., like Venezuela has a really good program, but are they going to have the same success? Maybe it's just a golden class. But if you can consistently put teams, even your B teams, into the quarterfinal of the U20 World Cup, it shows that you're doing that. You have like more than just a golden generation, with what Venezuela might have here, but instead you're having a consistently strong program, and then that's eventually going to feed the national team better than just one U20 classes, having like a bunch of one. I'll have several good U20 classes as opposed to one great one. It's a broader pool of players eventually in the long run to choose from. So, yeah, I think it's good, and the fact that they were able to do it back-to-back cycles, it means that you have a strong group to go from. And what I like about this team, and what I like the same thing about the 2015 team, is that the team played hard. I mean, they bought into a system. They worked their tails off. They represented the country well, and I think that that reflects well on the whole cycle. in the mentality between the whole cycle, because the last thing you need is players to be really good at this age and then feeling that they have made it and they're not and they're satisfied with where they're at, and that they're prima donnas and stuff like that. That's a real danger in any youth team throughout the world. Is like you could end up getting with a bunch of prima donnas and it really stunts their development. I don't get that sense that this team really wants to work hard. And moving forward, this 2017 U20 team is going to be the backbone of the next Olympic team. And, there's been a drought there in terms of qualifying for the Olympics, but that's because the older U20 cycle in every 4-year Olympic cycle has struggled, has been bad. I mean, look, if you look at the 2016 Olympic U20 team, or U23 team, rather, that was built on the U20 team in 2013, which was not good. And the 2012 failures came off the 2009 U20 team, which wasn't very good. So, I think that this team is going to really reverse that trend. I mean, they got all the tools.
And which players would you say that were in this tournament did you think impressed the most? Did you think are most capable of taking that next step? And were there any players that you kind of expected more out of or were a little disappointed by?
No, I don't think I was really disappointed by anybody. There were some players that, for example, I thought Cameron Carter-Vickers came in as a top prospect and he leaves as a top prospect. Mm-hmm. Nothing's really changed. The two players who really elevated the three players I think who elevated their status the most are Eric Palmer-Brown. I think when you combine the fact that he was the MVP in qualifying in a CONCACAF championship of the tournament at defensive midfield, and now for the first 4 games he was maybe the best defender at the U20 World Cup. Playing 2 different positions there, he was just dominant. I think he leaves as a guy who's going to have a lot of options, especially one guy who's in the last year of his contract and will be able to sign for free with any club throughout the world. It pressures Kansas City if they're going to try to make any hope to keep him to really pay a lot. But the fact that they never really got him much on the field, really kind of shows that. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he looks elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Obviously Josh Sargent got a lot of press, and I think he's a very good player. His lack of foot speed is as the players get older and defenders get older, is going to make him. He's going to need some good coaching to bring more sophistication to his game. He's very sophisticated as it is. His hold up. It's not everyone focuses on his goals, but watch how he was hitting players on his runs who were making runs. He tripped back into the midfield when they needed help. He was able to hold the ball, buy some time in possession. He can do a lot of good things besides score, which he can do. So, he walks away obviously in very good shape, and it'll be interesting to see he's going to go to Europe. But it's going to be interesting to see what he does until he turns 18 next February. He's going to have the U17 World Cup. So and then the last one is Tyler Adams. I think he was a little raw, but I think he's a very good player in certain roles. He has to bring some sophistication to his game. But remember, like Sargent, he's also eligible for the 2019 U20 team. So he's really young. But, he was able to be a good, covered a lot of ground, made good defensive plays. And he made some real good offensive plays, too. Won games that were in moments that really broke the play open. I mean, he was part of the build to the goal and the winning goal against Senegal and the opener against Saudi Arabia. So, I think those are 3 players that I was really impressed me the most. And other guys, kind of stayed the same. I think Eric Williamson has to really make a good. He's got the offer from DC. I don't know. He might be better smalling with not like a big European team, but maybe a smaller European team. He needs to bring some level of sophistication to his game, but also needs to play. I think Danny Acosta, he showed some limits. He's not an ideal left back, but when you factor in that he was only been playing this position less than a year, if he can continue, his learning curve along the project, he might be pretty good long term. Justin Glad's not a right back, but I think he'd be very good center back. So, De La Torre, good skill. Don't necessarily think he's a good fit in England. Derek Jones needs a lot of work. The upside's there. but he's got some good physical tools. So yeah, there's some players that look more ready than others, but there's some players there that, with the right situation, the right bit of coaching, the right environment, could be in good shape.
So I wanted to go back to the first guy you mentioned there, Eric Palmer-Brown, because he's gotten a lot of attention. We've gotten a lot of questions about him. You mentioned he's in the final year of his contract. Do you think there's a chance he stays in Major League Soccer, or do you think if he does go abroad, do you think he goes to a club like Porto where he already has some familiarity, or do you think he'll look elsewhere?
I think he's going to look for a place that he can play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think, for example, if a club like Manchester City showed up at the doorstep, you have to question, okay, that's a big club, but I mean, when is he going to see the field? Is it just playing in cup matches here or there? And then, Matt Miazga has done well, as a test on loan from Chelsea, but now look, he's got a situation where, okay, he's going to go back to Chelsea, but he's probably going to have to go on loan again. So It's like, do you really want to have to go on different loans every season, and then be in limbo in terms of how you're going to fit in with every club and not be able to develop and build from year to year with one club? And you have to kind of reestablish yourself with different clubs and loans, stuff like that. That's tough. It's a drag. Maybe he looks at a higher level team in Belgium, for example, where he can just go right in and play, and clubs are not afraid to sell when he gets to that level. I think, if he does make the move abroad, I don't think he's going to go for maybe the biggest club out there, but he's going to go with one that he could play. And does he return to Sporting Kansas City? I mean, he's got to really ask some questions, with Peter Vermees, if they do make an offer. I mean, the offer has to be right, but I mean, he needs to be given a long opportunity to start, it's been tough there. I mean, they're not like, for example, FC Dallas or the New York Red Bulls, which really find a way to get their young players on the field historically. If that was the case, maybe he would say, okay, I'll be willing to stick in Major. I think eventually he wants to go to Europe, but I think maybe he'd say, okay, I'm going to stick around Major League Soccer a little bit more and get to become more of the finished product before I go overseas, and get some, have a 3,000-minute season, which is great for any young player in any league if you can get to that amount. That's like what Matt Miazga did right before he went to Chelsea. Can he get 3,000 minutes a year or 2,500 a year? But if Kansas City if he doesn't feel like that's the best fit, we're at the point right now where not all Major League Soccer teams are the same, and Sporting Kansas City just doesn't have that track record of getting younger players on the field in the same way that other teams do. So it's a concern. It's not like Tyler Adams is probably going to start for the Red Bulls this weekend.
Yeah.
And that's just a good fit. Maybe he wants to stick around there for another 2 years and then make that jump, because I think he will make a jump eventually. But it's a tough thing to ask of a guy, let's say like Tyler Adams, be like to start for a first team, get a lot of minutes, and then all of a sudden go play with a reserve team somewhere, or it's one thing if you move over when you're 16, like Christian Pulisic, you're a youth player here, then you go overseas and you're still a youth player. But it's another thing to go when you're like a first team player and then drop down to like a youth level somewhere. Because then you're used to playing against men, and then you have to go play against younger kids again, and that's a tougher road than they make it out to be mentally, and everything. So I don't know. I would think that Eric's probably going to leave Sporting Kansas City if I'm guessing, but you never know. He likes being in Kansas City. He likes to be home.
All right. Well, as long as we're on the topic of guys who probably aren't going to play for Sporting KC, let's talk about Josh Sargent for a second. So I had two questions for you about him. The first is just kind of, I wanted to know, like, if you had heard any updates, if the Werder Bremen rumors were a little bit stronger than rumors, if that was where you expected him to end up. And the second question I had, based off of what you were saying earlier about his lack of foot speed, is there a player that you think he should look to when he's modeling his game? Like, I mean, I know I'm not trying to say he's the same before people make fun of me, but like, is it a player like Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who's not particularly fast, but makes up for that by being very clever? Josh Sargent doesn't really have that physicality and size that Zlatan has, so is there another name that you think could be a good player for him to watch consistently this season?
I mean, there's always a lot. I mean, he's. I mean, look. As for your first point, Werder. I mean, they're in it. They're certainly one of the questions. There's certainly, interest, but there's also it's far from a done deal. I think that there's bigger players than Werder in that. Teams that can throw more money. But then again, it's going to come down to Josh in terms of where he thinks he has a good avenue to the first team. I mean, is he at a Christian Pulisic level where he can go to a big club and then still be within shot of the first team? Is he that level of talent, or is he a guy who's is willing to wait a few years? It all comes together at the club level more than the U20 team. It's like the coaches have to get there and see the players with their own first eyes, and he has to have long discussions with his family, with all the coaches of the teams involved with him, and the personal decision about how high up he wants to reach initially at the first start of his career, and what would be satisfactory to him in terms of making his first team debut. Is he going to? When he turns 18, is he going to want to wait 2 years or a year and a half or whatever? What would be acceptable and what's not? And where does he have to be? But in terms of his style, I mean, it's tough to he's got really good feet. And again, he's a smart player. So he's got a lot of good things going on. He's more mature than just about everybody of his age. So, he has advantages, which was most impressive because you think okay, well, if he's that physically mature, of course he's going to dominate the U17s the way he did. But he adjusted really quickly into the 20s. But then can he turn it up a notch? And how's he going to do that on a week-by-week basis, not just a short spurt like you saw at the U20 World Cup? I think he's got a lot of good things going. He's a good overall soccer player, and his limitations, they're nothing fatal in his game. It's not like a awful first touch or something like that, or just no vision. Puts his head down. He's better than that. So, good coaches will, and he works hard, he'll figure it out. So again, it's going to come down to, you start hearing things like Man City that you want to do. I mean, it'll be tough for him to get a work permit anywhere in England. Excuse me. I think, I think it's going to be, you could see some really big clubs interested, but then, he's got to ask himself, is that what he wants, or what does he think his chances are the first time? I mean, that's a personal decision, and one I don't think he's prepared to answer right now. It's one that's going to take a lot of thought.
Yeah, and he's one who has performed so well, so consistently, and his name has risen so quickly that you do have to have that cautionary note of he is still very young. You got to give him time to grow and mature, because there are many, many names out there who we've all kind of staked our hopes on and been very excited about, and then things stagnate a little bit, which is my way of saying, in a kind of a depressing way, I wanted to ask you about what your thoughts are on Gideon Zelalem. Obviously, the bad injury in this tournament, I would say not having the greatest of seasons at VVV. What are your thoughts on his situation, obviously with the injury, and maybe what you expect out of him in the next year or so?
I mean, look, he's a good player. I mean, I should say he's very good at his strength. But, he's a flawed player, and he's had good coaching, but, you have to be concerned about the fact that he hasn't, his flaws are still apparent. I mean, before his injury, his track record on both of his loans, to Scotland, and which was in the second tier then in Scotland, that's very low level. And then, he had the responsibilities of being at a big club in weird circumstances in the lower tier, but the opponents were of a very low quality.
Yeah. And,
and then the second tier in Holland, and he rarely played, and You know, and what I think they was looking for was, you know, even if they didn't play him a lot, I think that they were looking, well, let's put him on treat this almost as an extended trial as to if this is the kind of player we want to bring back again when we get promoted to the Eredivisie. And you know, and say, okay, well, he's training with us, and maybe we'll see some minutes here and there. You know, when you're coasting towards promotion, you don't really want to make too many changes with the lineup because, you know, it's a short thing. Getting promoted is everything to these teams, and you have one lineup that's doing its job, that's getting you promoted. You don't want to mess with it. But I understood him not getting playing time. What was really concerning about it is that he didn't get playing time after they clinched.
Right.
And then also, you never really heard any rumors. I didn't hear one rumor or any mention in the Dutch press about them pursuing him to extend the loan into next season. And that's the kind of thing that would leak. You know, you always heard about like when some players are doing really well on a loan, like you heard with Heinemann, for example, at Rangers, that the reports were like, we hope we can keep him. We don't think that Bournemouth is gonna extend the loan, but we would love to have him back. You didn't hear any of that with Gideon. And not saying it wasn't there, but I mean, you probably would have heard it was true. And then obviously they were really quick to release him as soon as the U20 camp opened, like a preliminary camp. And you know, you hope he's just not like a specialty niche player. And if he is a specialty niche player and he can't get better, he's got to find just like those clubs that will just fit that niche and just ride it into the ground. He's not the kind of club player that anyone's going to jump at. So there's a lot of concerns with him right now. And, you know, of course, there was a lot of hype with him. You know, and I think a lot of that obviously was driven by Jurgen Klinsmann. I mean, when he came out and said, like, Gideon's ready for the first full U.S. national team right now.
Yeah, no pressure.
That was a couple of years ago. Yeah, you know, it was kind of unforced. You know, it was just, you know, it was, you know, and then, of course, then when a coach says that, the press has to kind of follow him because here we got a player who's going to probably kind of assume that he's a guy who's going to come into the national team at any minute.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's weird with Gideon because he's not a creative playmaker. He's not a 10. You know, he's not a defensive midfielder. He doesn't have the speed to play on the wing. He doesn't really have the defense to do box to box. So you have to kind of partner him with somebody. So the midfield has to be kind of all aligned just for a role, just for Gideon. And I don't think he's good enough to have a coach rearrange a whole midfield just to fit what's best for him. So it's tough. I mean, he needs to really work on his shortcomings. Not to say, but you know, his strength obviously got a great first touch, and you know, he can pick out a guy who's open with a good pass, like a longer range pass. But you know, that's not enough really in the modern game to claw into a really good team. Mm-hmm. And if his shortcomings are still the same as they were 2 years ago, yeah, I mean, not writing it off his career, but yeah, it's certainly there are warning signs about him. He's already 20.
More from Brian in just a second, but first, a word from today's sponsor. And to help me discuss that sponsor, I've got Daryl Grove on the line. Hello, Daryl Grove.
Hello, it's me. I'm back on the show. Thought you get rid of me, but you can't.
You are back on the show, which is always lovely, but you are on the move. So what is your current whereabouts, and where are you headed after that?
Okay, right now I'm at home. I am supposed to be packing my case, but instead I'm talking to you. I might get in trouble with my parents. And then in the morning, we're flying off for a family trip to Ibiza.
Right. And when you say home, you mean home in England, correct?
Yes. The home I grew up in, my parents' place. I nearly read my address out. That's probably not a smart thing to do.
Probably not a good idea, but I did want to clarify that it's not as though you've just been like hanging out at home. Or maybe you have and you've just tricked me. I don't know. Either way, we're not in the same city, hence why I'm calling you up via Skype.
Don't check my apartment.
All right. Well, now I'm going to. But I wanted to talk to you about today's sponsor, X1 Fuel. X1 Fuel, a pre- and post-workout formula for athletes who expect more from their workouts and on-field performances without sacrificing long-term health.
Yeah, student athlete tested and parent approved. You put it in the bottle, you shake it up, and then you drink it down, I believe, an hour and a half before the workout. Is that what we did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it gets you ready to go. It gets you, as I said before, excited to run, excited to work out. And here's my question for you, Daryl. I saw in the news that the England national team had been doing some, I'm going to say, extreme training. Can you talk about that? And can you tell us which player or coach, if you want to go that route, could have most used X1 pre-training ignition formula and post-training recovery formula for said workout?
So this was, the England team. I'm assuming you've seen this now then. The England team, Gareth Southgate decided when they all reported for practice, he said, we're not staying here at the practice facility in Burton. We're actually going to visit the Royal Marines at their training centre, and we're going to spend a day in the woods doing sort of Royal Marine workouts, which is obviously a military unit in England. And then there were all these pictures of the entire England team and Gareth Southgate in fatigues and having to go through all kinds of physical tests that are definitely much worse than the just running back and forth that normally happens in England training, and shooting at Joe Hart, which is probably easier than it should be. Yeah. The guy I would say needed it most, it's probably Gareth Southgate, because he was in the pictures doing all the intense workout stuff, but he's now 40-something, right? Probably pushing 50, and he probably had to prove to his players that this was a good idea, and he couldn't back out of any of the challenges. So I bet he could have done with a little boost before we got going.
That's a really good shout, because I know when VCU were doing their preseason, VCU basketball, and they still had Shaka Smart as their head coach, they would do the SEAL team training, and he was reportedly one of the most fit, ready to go people doing it. And I imagine you have to be if you're the coach, because you can't look like you're dying and you're forcing everybody else to do it. So maybe he just needs that little boost to get him going, Gareth Southgate. And if he needs a little boost with a little discount, what can he do, Daryl?
Yeah, so it's not a special England manager discount. It's something that any of our listeners can use. And if you go to x1fuel.com, when you check out, use the coupon code TOTALSOCCER, all one word, all uppercase, and you get $10 off of anything in the X1 Fuel store. Pre-workout, post-workout, anything that you want to find.
There we are. So thank you to X1 Fuel for sponsoring today's show. And Daryl, thank you for taking the time to come on, albeit briefly.
Yeah, anytime. You've got my phone number?
I do indeed. And I'll be heading over to your apartment just to give it a check. But until I get that done, here's more from Brian. So you, as I said earlier, you wrote that great post-mortem about the U20s. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for people who want to hear about some other players who you have some expectations and some high expectations for. But now I wanted to ask you about some guys not on this U20 team, maybe some dual nationals, maybe some other guys I wanted to check in on. And I wanted to start with some of the dudes on the Gold Cup roster. And I think we got to go with Kenny Saief. What do you think about him? Were you surprised to see him on that roster? And what do you know of him?
Well, I know him.
Well, that'll help.
I don't know of him. I mean, yeah, I've interviewed him a couple of times and checked in with him from time to time. And this was coming. I knew U.S. Soccer was reaching out to him. I think, when you look at the dual nationals and this is where I think I got all the angry tweets at me last time. And believe me, I talk to these guys. I don't question anyone's Americanness, and I think that that's unfair. The rules are any citizen could play for the U.S. team. Thomas Rongen, who brought in all the best, most of the dual nationals that were born or raised abroad, not the domestic raised and developed dual nationals, but the one, either born and moved away early or born and raised abroad entirely, were brought in by Thomas Rongen. And and he was always interesting to talk about. One of the things he told me, is like he always sat and met with the players, and discussed why they wanted to play for the U.S. and and made sure that they were, in his words, they were in it for the right reasons. And then if they were, and he chatted with them and their families, he was really eager to bring them in. And and Bruce, it's funny is like he got a lot of heat for his treatment of dual nationals. And even though when you look back on the 2002 team, I mean, there was plenty of dual nationals on that team. Carlos Yamosa, David Rigi, Paulo Mastroeni only had his citizenship for 7-8 months, by the time he was starting in the opener.
I always forget about Pablo, yeah.
Pablo was, is actually one of the best coaching moves Bruce Arena's ever made. Was Claudio Reyna is out in the first game, and Chris Armas went down with an injury before the tournament, but in that first game of the 2002 World Cup, Bruce Arena said, "I'm going to start you, Pablo." Pablo just won the Defender of the Year, or was first 11 in MLS that year, but only a second-year player in Major League Soccer. And what does he do? He goes out there and shuts down the reigning FIFA World Player of the Year in Figo in that opening game. I mean, that's a phenomenal accomplishment. But the guts to give Pablo the reins that he did in that World Cup was amazing, and it really paid off. But anyway, that's another story. But one I like to tell. But one with but back to Kenny is like, and his ties, Bruce was willing to reach out to Kenny, and his ties are interesting because they're not strong to the United States, and I think you can't really stress that they are. You just make an argument that they are. He was born in the United States. Neither of his parents are American. They're Israeli Jews. They left when they were frequently in and out of the country when he was living here. They didn't live in the country that long. They never acquired their citizenship, and then he left the country when he was 4, and he's yet to come back. He doesn't have any family here. Neither of his parents are here. He's not the son of a soldier or anything like that. Someone like Pablo Mastro, he didn't immigrate here like Dom Dwyer or Darlington Nagbe. So, he's coming in and he doesn't know anybody really. He's played against Ethan Horvath briefly, and he played against Sasha a couple of years ago in Belgium, but he doesn't know anybody on this U.S. team. So, he's coming in, but I really like his game. I love his intensity. I mean, he's, I think he'll win people over quickly because, I think, his passion just to win is known by whatever club he's at. Some fans or opposing media or opposite fans or fans of other countries might throw the mercenary tag at him. And, I don't think he's going to try to really, fight it off the field. I think he's just going to go out and try to win on the field and be the most intense person he can be. And, and that's the best way to win over a teammate more than stressing up your connection or dual national coming into an unfamiliar team. Best way is not to just hype up your connections or whatever. It's just to go out and win. And that's what wins. And the U.S. players, like anyone, they just want to win. And if Kenny has all the talent in the world to make the next World Cup team and be a difference maker there in Russia.
So where do you expect him to? Forgive me. Where do you expect him to factor in? Not necessarily where would he be in the 2018, but where will he play? Who might he be challenging for in terms of minutes?
I mean, look, I know he's played a little bit of left back. I think that's he does that in limited circumstances if there's an injury or if they're playing a 5-man back line with wing backs. He's an attacking player. He's very left-footed. Crafty. He can play. He likes to play on the left side. He can play on the right side and pinch in. I don't think he's going to start for the U.S. team for a while, but just because of the working his way into a team where he knows nobody is just going to be different. I think it's going to be something that's done over time. He might just be a super sub because if you look at how the Bruce Arena going to play, I mean, I think he wants Fabian Johnson and to be an outside midfielder, and then and Christian Pulisic will either start. Christian Pulisic obviously starts, but he could start either in the middle or out wide. And so you could have Fabian and Pulisic out wide. If Pulisic's in the middle, you have Nagbe out wide. And so it comes down to really. Or Bedoya, so he has that kind of line out there. Sykes he's not going to beat anybody with speed, but he's got a great shot. He reads the game very well. He's very crafty. He's not going to be the best American player out there, but he can really make a difference and be a spark plug. And my guess is if we're heading towards Russia, he might, when the first team is there and everyone's available, he very well might be the first offensive option off the bench. Or one of the top offensive options off the bench. But you never know. I mean, if he does well, maybe he does sneak into that. I don't think they'll start the same lineup all the time. Yeah. I don't think Bruce is like that.
Well, another thing Saif has is 2 caps for the Israeli national team. So I wanted to ask a little bit about that. Yeah, so he has to follow the one-time switch. I saw your tweet that he had already done that. I wanted to know if you had any idea what happened there. Did he just decide Israel wasn't a good fit? He wanted to play for the United States? Was there a falling out? Or was it maybe just a practical thing of the United States are probably more likely to go to a World Cup?
Well, every time I spoke with him, I'm like, why do you want to play for the U.S.? Mm-hmm. And like I said, he's not going to be like, well, it's where I was born. It's like he can't really stress up like, my father was a soldier.
Yeah.
Like, or I even remember, I have fond memories. He moved away before he can remember.
He loved Panama City, Florida.
Yeah. When I was 3, I loved Panama. It unfortunately can't do that. Doesn't mean he can't grow to really have some great attachments there, but they just don't. Eyes aren't that strong yet. But he's a winner. He wants to win. He wants, like any player, he wants to play at the highest level. And yeah, you could leave Israel like Aaron Johansson left Iceland, and Iceland goes on some great run at the Euros or whatever like that. But probably not. I mean, I think there was a time when Iceland, if they played their hand right, he would have played. If Israel played their hand right, they could have had him like Iceland did with Aaron Johansson. But playing the odds, knowing, seeing that the U.S. is not just a team that's going to make it to the World Cup, but look, if you look at the U.S. and its history, it's made it out of the group stage 3 of the 4 last World Cups. Yep. I mean, that's something to be proud of. I mean, that's not just a team that's going to go to the World Cup, is happy to be there and is going to get rolled over. They're, look, if they make it out of the group stage next time, it's making it out of the group stage 4 to 5 World Cups in a row. I mean, like, Italy hasn't done that. Granted, Italy can win the tournament, but like, the fact is that the U.S. isn't just a team like in 1990 where they just go and they show up and they're happy about that. That's a good thing. And or in when they were the host in '94, they made it out of the group stage, but only because there was third place teams. But now it's like a team where they have a legitimate hope of regularly finishing in the top 2. And then when you get to the knockout stage, that's when the fun begins. Anything can happen. So it's I think he sees that it's a team where he can do some damage at the World Cup, not just be happy to get there. So I think it's it's good. And like I said, I like Kenny. I think he's going to win people over just because of his intensity and his passion. And this is the kind of guy who's coming in to win, and that's what teammates and wins his teammates over quicker than anything. And wins, and I think he'll do that.
So the other one I wanted to ask about, the other one that I think a lot of people were surprised by was Jesse Gonzalez. I guess he's going by Jesse. It is Jesse, not Hesse, because he's trying to play for the USA. I could be wrong on that one, but who knows? But I wanted to ask, were you surprised that he made that Gold Cup roster? Was this something that maybe had been in the works behind the scenes? And why do you think it is that it seemed like he had committed to Mexico? It seemed like that week he had committed to Mexico, and yet here he is potentially playing for the USA if he makes that final roster.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised. I'm not as down on the next young generation of American keepers without him. I mean, there is a concern that there's no one like dominating the Premier League like there was in the past. But I think if you start looking from the page, even without Bill Hamid and who's really never always looked good but never been able to take that next step, like I think Ethan Horvath is good. I still at Columbus, despite some struggles here and there, I think Zach Steffen will eventually work out and do well. I think Jesse's going to have some real competition there, and it's a risk here for him too. I think there's a more manageable path to the first team with Mexico than the United States, but for whatever reason, I think he thinks it's a risk worth taking right now, and he just signed a new deal with FC Dallas. On the heels of this, so he's really going out on a limb here to play for the U.S. team, because I don't think anything's given or granted. And look, at this age for a goalkeeper in the early 20s, at that position is very, very young. So this is something where we might not know the benefits and his potential. Same thing with Steffen and Horvath. We might not know where they really are at keepers at their prime for maybe till after Qatar. I mean, it's it's a ways down the road yet, but we'll start getting their senses, over the. I think this Gold Cup will offer the first couple steps here, but it's a long path for the goalkeeper to make this team. And like I said, I don't know. I think it's going to be Tim Howard through this cycle, and then really going to have to the next national team coach to kind of sift through the goalkeeping position. I think Bruce will do his best to kind of explore all options, but I think that these are questions that will probably have to get answered in probably about 2 years' time.
So is the conventional wisdom then, because I saw I think it was the beginning of last week that Jesse Gonzalez was going to sign a new deal with FC Dallas, and then there was some speculation that was because they were preparing to sell him, so they wanted to make as much money as they could. Then it was and he's definitely going to be playing for Mexico too. Now all of a sudden he's committed long-term to FC Dallas, and it seems like he's playing for the USA. So do you think maybe that was just people jumping the gun there, or do you think he really did just kind of change it up at the last minute?
I don't think, I think he's always look, he has a lot of people whispering in his ear that are, I think, through the academy with Kellen Acosta, who has a very bright future. So I think when you're at FC Dallas, start looking at guys like, Oscar Pereira, who I think will be I'm not saying he's going to get it, but I think he will be a candidate for the next, he'll certainly get interviews and maybe, people will poke around make their case that he should be the next U.S. national team manager. And you see guys like Kellen Acosta, who's going to be the next U.S. center midfielder for a long time, and Hedges now, and Zimmerman in the program, and Paxton Pomykal will be on the next U.S. U20 team. So he's seeing guys all around him make their entry into the U.S. national team. People who he's very close with, really have international careers with the U.S. So it's only logical that that's going to be what he's surrounded by now. FC Dallas is one of the best youth development paths that this country has to offer. They're doing a very good job of it, and so you start seeing that, and of course I think he's gonna sign with FC Dallas. He's gonna be around. He's tying himself with a strong development path in the United States, and look what he's surrounded by right now. So it's only natural, I think, that the more and more he's there at FC Dallas, the more the U.S. national team is going to be just sitting right in front of him.
All right. Well, I wanted to talk to you about some other guys not on that Gold Cup roster, but people who I'm also very excited about, starting with I am a Manchester United fan. We had a couple people email in to ask about the situation of Matt Olosunde, who I think was training with Man United's senior squad, didn't make the bench, didn't make any minutes this season. Do you have any word on what the expectations are for him, both from a national team level and then maybe from a club level? Is he going to stay with United next season? Do you think he gets loaned out? What do you think he should be looking for next year?
I think he needs to be. It's going to be tough to not crack right now at Man United because they're such a team with such high expectations, and you don't ever see them getting to a situation where they're running away with anything anymore, and they could afford to play younger players. I mean, I'm one of those guys, people who say okay, if they're just a team that gives a couple of young players chances in League Cup games, and everyone gets really excited about them, but they never play in meaningful league games, or I think that's very misleading. So if he was to ever make like a League Cup game appearance for Manchester United next year, everyone would get really excited about it. But I'm kind of grizzled when it comes to that stuff. So you have to look at the pathway towards really meaningful Premier League games. They're just in a tough position right now, and do I ever see him playing first regularly or for Manchester United? No, and I hope I'm wrong. I mean,
why you got to break my heart here, Brian? Why you got to do that to me?
I know, look, he's a New Jersey guy. I'm pulling with that for him, but I think he's in a position to develop. But at some point, he's going to need to play. He's going to have to come to a cold realization as to where is the best place to play regularly and get a lot of minutes, loan or sale. But look, I think having the Manchester United experience and development thing, it won't seal the deal with everybody, but it'll open some doors for him someplace, somewhere, and let's see how it works out for him. And internationally, I think he just needs, I don't think for the Olympic team in a couple of years anyone's settled in it right back. So if he does well, that position I think would still be open for him at some point.
All right, since you've hurt my feelings in saying that Manchester United won't have an American playing there, at least anytime soon, can you at least make me feel better and tell me that there won't be any Americans playing for the senior Liverpool team? No disrespect to Brooks Lennon, but the one I'm really looking at is Christian Pulisic, who continues to be linked with that club, does have the new coach at Dortmund now. Do you see him staying with Dortmund and trying to make an impression with Peter Bosz, or do you think maybe he does get a move this summer?
I mean, I think Christian Pulisic is one of the best players, 1998-born players in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think any coach, no matter how great of young talent he's been around, is going to see what Christian Pulisic can offer.
Mm-hmm. Don't do this to me, Brian. Don't do this to me.
Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think he wants to go anywhere. Okay. I mean, I think as long as he's at a top club, I mean, to move up from Dortmund is like that only means like a handful of clubs, and I don't necessarily think Liverpool is one of them. So I mean I would consider Liverpool a lateral move at best. Now they have they both have storied fan bases, but I don't understand what the appeal is from Liverpool unless he can get a big pay raise. And look, it is his career, but and you like Jurgen Klopp. But, I think at some point, I think, if he's going to make a move from there, it's going to be to an eye-opening club. And I hope that, unless he has a falling out with the new manager, but, we're still a long way from that point. And especially if Bosz is really good at identifying young players and being surrounded by young players. You have to have enough faith that he's going to be able to look at Christian Pulisic and go, wow.
All right, and the final guy, I appreciate how much time you've given us. You're always very good at making sense of confusing situations, at least confusing to me. The final one I wanted to ask about was Josh Perez, and there was a lot of talk about him going into the U20 World Cup because he wasn't released by Fiorentina. Varying reports on who was responsible for that and how much of a snub that was, but it seems like it was basically so he could stay with the Fiorentina Primavera team and continue to compete in that competition. And do you think that's fair to say? And what do you expect from him next season? Do you think there's a chance he makes that Fiorentina senior side and starts getting some minutes, or do you think again he's one who maybe goes on loan or stays with the academy system?
Yeah, it was a tough progression for him. He made his debut, and that was good. But, he didn't stick around with the first team as much as I would have hoped. I mean, especially when they're a team that goes, that they have like a 20, I think in Italy now, the Sciaretta bench is not 18 players. It's 21 or 23. And it's good that he's playing with the Primavera team. But I think he's proven that he's done the Primavera thing. He started in the Primavera League. Now what? And is he kind of in this gray zone where he's too good for the youth level and not good enough for the first team? That's a tough position to be at. Then maybe you have to start looking at a loan. But then again, if he's a young player, you have to go on a loan. Then other teams are not really invested in his talent unless they have an option to buy. I don't know what I have not read anything or heard anything about Fiorentina's willingness to have an option to buy. Put him on loan and with having an option to buy, how willing they would be to do that. One thing you can't do is what Cameron Carter-Vickers did this year was okay at some levels, but it's nothing he can really repeat because he was that mad. He went from being able to play with their Tottenham's under 23 team and under 19 team, all the previous season, but this past season he was with the first team, but he was on the bench, so he's only playing in cup matches. And he was very rarely playing with the under 23 team. So his game total went from 44 to 50 games a season to 8 to 10 games a season. And that's a drastic drop.
Yep.
But yeah, he got the challenge and trained with some of the best players in the world, but and that's great, but it has a shelf life. I'm not convinced Josh is the player that can really afford a drop off in the number of games. And I'm really concerned about him because, I think, he needs to play, but I don't necessarily know if Fiorentina's first team is going to get him the minutes he needs, and I don't think staying with the Primavera team is going to I think that might do more harm than good, too, just because I think as he gets older, he's just going to be able to do – there's no ratcheting up the intensity level, which is what young players need. So I don't know what's going to happen with him right now, but it's going to be a tough decision for Fiorentina.
Well, Brian, this is why we have you on the show, because you can at least kind of explain them in these terms that help me to better understand what to expect from him in the coming season and how to grade it as a success. Because Cameron Carter-Vickers, I do still have that idea of he's up, but he's on the bench for Tottenham. Oh, he's in the squad, and so that means he must be really close. When in reality, instead of playing him at center back when somebody's injured, they drop Eric Dyer back. So maybe he's not quite that close.
Yeah, it's look. I think that Argentina said that he's going to play more with the first team next year in real minutes, not like the sparring League Cup matches. But what does that mean? I don't know yet. We will find out. But you can't just 8 to 10 games a year is just eventually training can only take you so far, and you need to play. But I think Vickers' center back is different from a creative type. Mm-hmm. It just is. I think training has a longer shelf life, but I think attackers, center backs have a longer career span. They get older, they age better. It's a more physical position. I think all those things kind of benefit. I don't think Josh can do what Cameron does for as long as Cameron's done it. I think Josh needs to play. So that's just what I said. And hopefully this segment here wasn't as controversial as last time, but I'm happy to do it anyway.
Well, I don't think it was, but I guess we'll leave it up to the internet.
You never know, man. You never know.
Yeah.
I'll check my Twitter.
Yeah, well, if people do want to hear more from you, find more out about what you're writing, what you're doing, where can they follow you? Where can they read you?
American Soccer Now, Howler Magazine, occasionally the New York Times, but on Twitter I'm at Brian Sciaretta. I'm always around, and I try to be engaging as much as I can with people who listen to me tweet. So if you have any questions or want my opinion on things, just tweet at me, and I usually get back.
Beautiful.
To people.
Well, Brian, thank you again for taking the time. I very much appreciate it, and hopefully you don't get too many mean tweets after this one.
I'll soak it up like it's fun. I'm wearing like a badge of honor.
All right, Brian, thanks a lot.
No problem. I'll talk to you later.
You gotta slice it.